This morning I'm going to talk about listening, one of the steps of the 8 steps to the authentic networker, probably the most important step. And some of you have heard this story where I first got tuned into listening. I used to study a lot of rapport building techniques, and I used to read this magazine called Psychology Today. This is like 30 years ago, maybe 35 years ago. And Psychology Today was doing this fascinating experiment where it was about rapport building. It wasn't about listening, and they were teaching a strategy, which I don't teach it as a strategy. But I just want you to hear this story, and then we'll talk about how I would encourage you to embrace the art of listening. I'm hiking the back 9 this morning because I'm early, and yesterday I got down to the beach at apparently 5 to 7, which what you don't want to do in Hawaii is be on the beach from 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. because that's when COVID is the most active. So I got kicked off the beach yesterday morning because I was early. Crazy world. I'm all for precautions, right? I am all for not getting COVID or giving it to anyone, and just some of the rules they come up with are a little bizarre. Anyway, back to listening, right? So here's the story. The editor of Psychology Today is going to fly from New York to Los Angeles nonstop, and his job is to talk to his seatmate and ask his seatmate questions about the seatmate. And if the seatmate asks him any questions, he's going to answer the questions, but then he's going to turn the conversation back to the seatmate and ask more questions. And all of this was around the art of building rapport with someone, which is awesome, right? Valuable, super valuable word of mouth relationship marketing skill is build rapport. What does rapport basically mean? That the other person trusts you, admires you, respects you, wants to be in your presence, is honored by you. All of those things, right? So if you're going to sell somebody something, having rapport, pretty valuable. So, I'm reading the article, and so they fly to LA, and the editor of Psychology Today is asking all these questions, and the seatmate answers the questions, and he asks more questions, and it wasn't an interrogation, it wasn't an interview, so, they said, hey, then I read my book for an hour, and then I would ask a few more questions when dinner was served, or whatever, right? Casual conversation. Step 1 of the authentic networker is he was acting curious. Now, step 1 is be curious. That's different than acting curious, but to the person you're curious about could end up landing the same way. So the editor gets off the plane. This is pre-TSA, so the staff members are right at the gate. They fly ahead, okay? So they fly ahead. They're at the LAX airport. They're at the gate. The editor gets off the plane, the seatmate gets off the plane, they intercept the seatmate. And they ask him, hey, what did you think about the guy you flew out here with? And the seatmate said, the most interesting man I've ever met. Now, I don't know if Psychology Today embellished this article or this experiment, but this is what the article said. The most interesting man I've ever met. And so they asked him a few questions like, well, why was he coming to LA? And the seatmate didn't know. Well, tell us about his family. He didn't know that either. Well, what does he do for a living? He didn't know that either. Well, what's his name? He didn't know that either. That doesn't mean the editor didn't tell him, but you know how long we remember people's names after they tell us? It's about 2.5 nanoseconds, and we don't remember it. Why? Because we're not listening. Not listening to them anyway. We're listening to us. So, that's what really got me paying attention to, okay, well, let me start studying listening because this is interesting. Because up to that point, maybe 10 years as a sales promoter, a network marketer, a business person, an entrepreneur, how I'm trying to have people find me the most interesting person I've ever met is by the car I drive and the 18-karat gold Rolex President I'm wearing and the $3,000 custom suits that I'm wearing. And, sometimes I'm aloof, right? So that I can be interesting. I don't know, all these different things, to be interesting. In fact, I'll tell you another sidebar story. So I was so deeply embedded in the making myself look interesting mode in about 1982 or 3. I'm making $40,000 a month at the age of 27 or 28 years old. And this is like 200 years ago. Myself and my sponsor and his sponsor, the three of us upline, we go into Teeners in Oklahoma City. I don't even know if it's still there, but it's a high-end Western store in Oklahoma City. And we drop about $5,000 each on Stetson hats and, big belt buckles. Not that we won at the rodeo, of course, but that we bought at Teeners. Mine had a $20 gold piece in the talons of a solid gold eagle and this belt buckle as big as your head. And, we had like $500, I don't know, $2,000, I don't know how much they were. Like my boots were blue anteater. So I bought blue anteater boots, this giant belt buckle, Stetson hat, I don't know, all this other kind of stuff, right? And so I'm in Oklahoma City because we had some meetings there, but I was living in Chicago. And so I fly back to Chicago after our Teeners run, and I'm standing on the curb at O'Hare waiting for Russ Devan, who lived there in Chicago, and he was on my team, and he's going to pick me up on the curb. I'm just standing there in my $3,000 dark blue serge custom suit, my blue anteater boots, my giant belt buckle, which doesn't belong on a suit, and my white Stetson hat. And Russ is going to pick me up in my, about 6-month-old white Lincoln Mark V Collector's Series that had matching blue and velour interior and gold trim. It was a 1979 Lincoln Mark V Collector's Series, right? I'm standing on the curb, waiting for Russ to come in my fancy car. And this lady walks up next to me on the curb. She's waiting for somebody too. And she looks at me and she says, "Are you a real cowboy?" Oh my God, what a life lesson. I'm just standing there going, well, I actually used to be, but I'm not now. And I must look pretty stupid here on the curb of O'Hare with my fancy Teeners outfit, trying to look interesting, right? And did it work? Well, maybe, but it wasn't very attractive. So, and sorry for the sidebar story, but that's the Teeners story. So the seatmate thinks that the editor of Psychology Today is the most interesting person he's ever met. Why? Well, because the editor was curious. But you also might think about it as listening, right? So I started studying listening, and here's what I found out about listening. I had my own listening coach, and I had this gal for 10 years that all she did for my team was teach listening and being present and coaching and all these distinctions. And I got deep into it. And here's what I learned about listening. This is how you and I listen. In most cases, most humans listen. Most salespeople listen. Most leaders listen. Most coaches listen this way. I ask you a question. While you're answering the question, I may make eye contact. Yeah, that's one of the things I learned is active listening. I hear you. I'm connected. See? Oh, where's the camera? I probably should be looking right at the camera, right? Eye contact. And every time you say something, I'm like a bobblehead. Yeah, I agree with you. Yeah, I get what you're saying, right? So that's real active listening. I learned all of this stuff. And What I also learned is from like some savant level listeners is that what we do while people are talking to us is we're talking to us. So if you're answering my questions, instead of me being present to your answers, what I'm doing is talking to me. And what are some of the things I might be saying to me while you're answering my question? I might be asking, well, what am I going to ask her next? Or you might be answering my question and I'm criticizing your answer. Like I might ask you, well, where do you live? And you say, Bemidji, Minnesota. We're real big on Bemidji the last couple of days. And I'm thinking, why would you live in Bemidji, Minnesota? Where's that? That's way up in mosquito land, right? The mosquitoes up there are as big as cows. Why would you live up there? Why does anybody live up there? Are you broke? Or are you lost? Why would anybody live in northern Minnesota? Why would you live there in the winter? Why would you live there in the summer? When would you live there? While you're telling me you live in Bemidji, Minnesota, this is what I'm saying to myself. Or maybe I ask you, what do you do for a living? And you're telling me what you do for a living. And I'm like wondering why you're wearing that brooch. Like, where did you get that brooch? Do you think that brooch is attractive? Who did your hair? Like, who picked your clothes out this morning? You might want to think about maybe having a little work done, right? Because you're looking a little tired around the eyes. So, here, this is how we listen. We criticize people, we agree with people, we disagree with people. Like my default listening, if you're talking to me, is, oh, gee, look at the time. Could you hurry up and get to the point? Because I probably asked you a yes or no question and you're still like running off at the mouth 10 minutes later about I don't know what. So my default listening is get to the point. That's the filter that I listen to. Or what is the point? That's another filter I listen to. I ask somebody a question or blah, 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 10 minutes later, and I'm going, what is the point? What is the punchline? Could you get to the punchline? And of course, we don't listen out loud. We listen silently. So as long as we're like eye contact and bobbleheading, well, people might think we're listening. But we're not. Well, we're not listening to them anyway. We're listening to us. And so there's about 10 different ways that people listen. They're kind of filters. Like no matter what you and I say to each other, the person on the other end is listening through a filter. Probably one of the biggest filters people listen to is agree, disagree. So whatever I ask you, whatever your answer is, I'm listening for whether or not I agree with you and whether or not I disagree with you. And if I agree with you, well, you might think that like engages me in the conversation, but not really, because if I agree with you, then you don't really have anything to add to me because I already agree with what you're saying, so I tend to check out. And if I disagree with you, well, you certainly don't have anything to add to me, so I tend to check out, right? So if you listen to agree, disagree, you tend to check out. Another way that we listen is one-upmanship. This is one of the most popular ones. You get the distinction one-upmanship, you'll hear it everywhere, right? So somebody's telling a story, right? Okay, yesterday I go down to the beach, I'm 5 minutes early on the beach, the park ranger sees me out there. He doesn't know how I got out there because I came along the cliffs and I didn't come through the parking lot. And he's scoping out the parking lot, making sure nobody comes to the beach before 7 a.m. And I get to the beach before 7 a.m. and he kicks me off the beach and blah, blah, blah. And the whole time I'm telling that story, what are you doing? You're thinking about the better story you have, the COVID stupid rule story that you have. And all you can do is wait for me to take a half a breath, just a little inhale, just to get a little bit of breath so I can continue my story. And in that pause, you're going to jump right into the pause and you're going to tell your fish story, which is going to be better than my fish story. And so while I'm telling my fish story, what you're doing is you're thinking of your fish story. And you're just waiting for the opportunity to jump in. That's the listening. So imagine how this would land for each other if we listened out loud. So I ask you to tell me a story, or we're having a conversation and you're talking. And while you're talking, everything I'm thinking, I'm saying out loud, right to your face. Imagine how disconnected we would be as human beings. That's how disconnected we actually are. Because you and I can actually tell intuitively whether somebody is present. And that's the level of listening we're going for, is being present. And the best analogy I can give you for being present is a meditative state. So when you and I are meditating, we're not thinking about anything else. And that's why they give us a mantra, because a mantra doesn't mean anything and doesn't have a word picture associated with it. So you just repeat the mantra over and over and over again. As long as you're focused on the mantra, you're not thinking about anything else. And of course, we're humans, so if you're meditating, your mind wanders off and you start thinking about something. But if you practice meditation, all you do is bring yourself back to being present to your meditation. And then as soon as you see you're off track, you bring yourself back on track. So meditation is like a GPS device, right? GPS just checks till we get off course, it brings you back on course. You get off course, it brings you back on course. So that's how we listen, folks. That's how you listen to be present. And you want to talk about having a profound effect on people, light years ahead of the editor of Psychology Today. Listen to be present. It's therapeutic. It's healing for people. And you start listening to people to be present, to like actually get what they're saying, get how they're feeling, feel how they're feeling, like bring deep empathy to the conversation. Be deeply curious about how they got this opinion, where they got this opinion, how they live this opinion out in their life, how this story has impacted them. Like, be deeply curious. This being curious and listening to be present are synonymous. They're seamless. They happen back and forth at the same time. I'm curious, and when I ask you a question and you answer the question, I am 100% present. It's not about eye contact. It's definitely not about nodding your head. It's just about being there and not being present to any other conversation. Not any judgment, not what am I going to say next, not what is my next question, not what am I going to do with this, how am I going to convert this to a sale, like how am I going to move her in this direction, what's the next question I can ask that can manipulate, none of that crap. Because just imagine you said it all out loud. That's how disconnected you are. You want to be connected with people? You want to have people find you to be the most interesting person they've ever met? Ditch the Stetson and the blue anteater boots and be present. Listen to be present. And people will follow you anywhere. They'll definitely, when it's your turn, listen to you with a new level of trust, admiration, and respect, which is what you need, folks. If you're in network marketing, for example, there's not a lot you can do right now to change the image of network marketing. Most people don't like it. Most people don't trust it. Most people don't understand it. And, getting people to follow you around because of your product or your company or your comp plan or because of network marketing, not easy to do. But you can get people to follow you. You can get people to be interested in you by listening to be present. And then when it is your turn to say, you know what, let me show you what I'm doing. Let me show you who I am. Let me show you one of the ways I express who I am. This is what I'm doing to build wealth. This is what I'm doing to build health. If people find you the most interesting person they've ever met, they're likely to listen, and listen through a filter of wanting to know, well, what do you know that I don't know? Why would you be doing this? What are these? Why would you be using these products? Like, you kind of lead people to their own level of being curious and being present to you. And if you want a shot of showing people what you're doing, whether you're selling real estate, mortgages, cars, or network marketing, you want people to be present to you when it's your time to paint the picture of what you're doing and why they might want to do it. Make sense? That's today's lesson in Daily Dose of Salt. Now I've got about 45 minutes at least, hike home. And this is where I gotta go. I'm at the far end of Fisherman's Trail. Fisherman's Trail doesn't go any farther than this. That's called Shepherd's Island out there. It kind of looks like a rock outcropping, but it's actually an island of sorts. Really good diving and fishing around Shepherd's Island. And let's check on our sunrise. It's up into the clouds. Nothing prettier than getting up this morning at 4:30 and seeing the moon setting on the ocean. That's pretty special. So, who am I going to call? Oh, Stacy. Good job, Stacy. You're telling me who to call. All right, so if you're new to Daily Dose of Salt, on the back half of my hike, what I'm currently doing is calling somebody that is ready for some serious coaching. I'm looking for Nicole's phone number. Well, I'll find it. Maybe Stacy will just text it to me. How about that? Hey gang, thanks for joining me for Daily Dose of Salt. I go live every morning around 6:15, 6:30 Hawaii time, which is 3 hours earlier than California and 6 hours earlier than the East Coast. If you find this valuable for people that you know, family, friends, business associates, teammates, share it with them. Tag them. Put it on your wall. Do something like that. I appreciate you all. See you tomorrow.